Welcome to Zeitgeist Radio. I'm Morgan Rowe, founder of the Zeitgeist Academy. Every episode here on Zeitgeist Radio, I speak with someone from a unique musical subculture looking to understand their relationship with music. Zeitgeist means spirit of the times. Imagine all the things that make this moment feel different from other times. The way people feel, what they like, the things they do together. That's what we call zeitgeist. It's like a big invisible bubble that helps us understand the spirit or feeling of the time we're in. The idea here is that music may be universal, but each musical scene has its own mini zeitgeist, and that's what we're here to learn about on this podcast. But before we begin, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio and put in your email address. I send a weekly newsletter with backgrounds and stories about our awesome guests, cool musical facts, and ways you can get involved if you love music and want to do more than just listen to a podcast. That's zeitgeist academy.com. My guest today is Anastasia Verdoljak, a folk dance performer in St. Paul, Minnesota. Stacia, welcome to Zeitgeist Radio.
Thank you very much, Morgan. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you about folk dancing. You and I have known each other all through college. We went to college together, and we've known each other in a lot of musical settings, but I haven't seen you dance, folk dance, and that's something that you're also really into. So let's start with, can you give everyone a brief intro of who you are musically? How would you say it?
Well, I took piano when I was little. My mom was a piano teacher, forced into that. I enjoyed it, though. I then did public school orchestra, learned violin at a public school. I want to emphasize that. And now I direct the high school orchestra. So I followed in that tradition. And through college, had wonderful pedagogues there and met some people for life. That is the short version. But I now also perform in a Transylvanian folk band as a fiddle player. So
that's awesome.
long and short of it.
We could do another episode on that. That sounds very interesting. What about as a folk dancer? What was your first experience folk dancing and how did you fall into that?
It's hard to pinpoint it. As I was thinking through this, I was friends with, we had family friends growing up, and the uncle, basically, of the person I knew, directed this ensemble. And so we would often be invited to go to the performances. And at some point when I moved to St. Paul to go to college, then I was invited to be an usher because then I could go for free, as a poor college student. And so I would see these different performances. And then they always asked, well, you were in ballet growing up and your last name is Croatian. I mean, you should join. And they do a lot of Balkan dances we'll talk about later probably. And I said, I'm too busy. So eventually, post-masters, I did join. But, Tapestry Folk Dance Center was another place I did a couple of times in college. And I remember just being really intrigued by the line dancing and the different footwork and the music. So again, hard to pinpoint, but
I went to some dances there, some contra dances at Tapestry. That is a great hall, a great center resource in St. Paul. How fun.
Yeah.
Nice. So yes, you brought up Balkan. Is that the main? So did I understand right that you were doing that before, the Balkan style before?
I guess I had been introduced to it, but I had never danced it myself beyond just a couple times at Tapestry. And then kind of post-college, post all sorts of schooling, then when I joined Ethnic Dance Theater, which is the group that I had seen all through my life, then that's when I really got into that. And that's a large portion of what Ethnic Dance Theater does. Although the reason that it has that name, and now, these days it might have a different connotation, but the idea of the title of it was that the group does all sorts of dance, but well-versed in Balkan dance. And that has to do with Bulgaria, Croatia, Serbia, Macedonia, kind of the Balkan Peninsula region, of course.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So you mentioned some countries. What differentiates that from other specific styles?
From my perspective as a dancer, and not as one who has specifically studied it or gone to the region for that, but for me, the things that I think maybe a person who's coming to a performance might pick out is a lot of line dancing. So as opposed to partner dancing, where I would say Croatia is the one where you might see some partner dancing as well. It's a little bit more Western influenced, but a lot of the Balkan region, you'll see some kind of attachment to the person next to you in a long line. It might be a mixed line. It might be just women, just men. It depends on the music and the style and the region and what is appropriate. You might see, for example, we did a Bosnian piece that we had to use scarves because the men weren't supposed to touch the women. So then you both just held onto the scarf with the person next to you. There was another one, Macedonian, where the scarf was a signifier of the line leader. So the person who might be setting what the footwork might be, which also might be dictated by whatever the musicians are playing. But they also might do a little solo at the front and twirl around and come back to the line and things like that. So a lot of line dancing, a lot of coins. Not that isn't something present in other cultures, but for example, the Bulgarian pieces that I've always done, or North Bulgarian, or that I've done, have always had some kind of coin necklace or coins, built into the costume in some way, so that when you do the bouncing or any kind of leaping, it makes more sound and shows off whatever wealth you might have as well. So so those are just a couple of things. There are all sorts of mixed meters that might happen in the music. 7/8 time is kind of one that Westerners can get into a little more and understand. But there are all sorts of wild mixed meters. There's also the influence of the Ottoman Empire and Turkic influence of the 9, whether it's 9/8 or whatever, something in 9 also kind of gets woven into that area, kind of the on one edge of the Balkan Peninsula. So yeah, so mixed meter, costuming, and then the line dancing was what I would say look for.
Nice. Wow. You mentioned so many things. I have had some exposure to folk dancing, both through my husband and then also some friends that I've encountered. I've been to a couple like social folk dances as well. I find them very intimidating because like you just learn by doing and you have to pay such close attention. So can you talk a little bit about what your process was learning this and learning all of those steps to the point where you could perform them?
Sure. I think having a ballet background, that was both a blessing and a curse, in that I had an idea of how to approach what my body might be doing, or I had some kind of coordination. I had a sense of the pulse and what to listen for in the music. And at the same time, ballet is very up and you're wanting to look like you're floating. Folk dance is often very earthy, and I really had to learn to use my knees in a different way. So having the sense of how to approach dance in general was helpful, but then it was just a lot of practice. I mean, it was that idea of the practice room, except for the practice room for dancers, is luckily you get to be with each other, but then also other people get to see you mess up as you're practicing. And a lot of feedback in the moment every time by the director or other dancers who are more versed. So for me, once I auditioned and they thought, okay, well, you can obviously keep a sense of the beat and you've danced before, but we have some things we have to work on. But they allowed me to come in and kind of slowly introduced me to different choreographies. And by the first show, I think I was a little bit thrown into the fire in some ways, but in other ways, it was good for me to have to learn by doing in those 9 months. So, but yes, it was a lot of drawing on my background, but then trying to coordinate what is different about each style. And the good thing about having a little bit different background than maybe some of the folk dancers who came in, which is also a great background to have. Like in our group, we have people from the Czech and Slovak group in town, the Hungarian group, the Bavarian group, Polish, Ukrainian, I'm missing some, but yeah. So we have people who want to do something more than perhaps just the culture in which they're performing with or attached to. And so we have people with all sorts of influences. And for me, I sort of a clean slate in some ways beyond the ballet, where I was like, I don't really know how to folk dance. So I really enjoy watching it. And I've seen, I've gone to Tapestry twice, but that was about it. So I, in some ways, was able to say, okay, there are different styles. We're doing Macedonian. We're also then doing Costa Rican. We're doing, just such vastly different things going on there. And how to change the way that you either have your hands or just the movement that you have. Is it aggressive? Is it lighter? Anyway, so I think that having a clean slate in some ways was good, because we do such vastly different styles as well.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get into some of those other ones too. But I have a couple more questions about the Balkan. That was really interesting that you said that the 7/8 or the 9 meters are more accessible to people who aren't familiar with it. That, to me, 7/8 is like not a super usual thing. Like if I think beginner friendly, it's not the first thing my brain goes to is 7. So
And
what
I would say relatively speaking
yeah,
to the
yeah. Well, but can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like what are the some other meters that you might see then if that's the easy one?
Well, okay. So, and I think part of it is just knowing how to break it down, or that you're not even counting it out as a dancer often, although it helps to have that musical background, and our director often tries to help us pick out what the musicians are doing, whether it's a recording or musicians we're working with
Yeah.
or so. But it's the strong and the weak beats are often how we might group them. And so, and is it at 3-2-2? Is it 2-3-2? Et cetera, et cetera. And then where's the strong beat? Where do you hear the bass and or the percussion, whatever might be the percussion section, holding that together. Yeah. So what to listen to with the strong beat and weak beat, and how to group the meter, because it's not that you're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 every time, but as a dancer, you have to know where your step needs to land. And is this going to be the longer landing, or is this going to be the shorter landing of the 2-2? And is it a hop? Is it a skip? Is it a jump? And so I think being able to have that small basis of where's the strong beat and then how to group them is the main thing. But yes, it does sound beyond intriguing if you're thinking, how do I dance to that? Because usually 3-4, you're either waltzing or you're doing a polka, and those are pretty standard as well when we do certain other suites, like a Polish suite or Bavarian or even Croatian. We'll bring those in, and that's more, we're more well versed in Western culture with those kinds of music, of course.
Yeah, it's funny because I think most people, when they hear the word line dancing, they picture like a country bar with like
and that's
people in
another
cowboy
type.
boots coming on. That's not what we're talking about, people.
It's like you're attached in a line somehow. You're holding on someone the belt next to you or whatever. Yeah, so different.
Interesting. I've been to ones where you hold pinkies.
Okay, yeah, probably another version, or behind. Is it a back basket, as we unofficially call it? Is it that you're putting your hands behind, or just holding hands? Yeah, there are many ways you can attach oneself, and it's folk dance. So I mean, it's meant for the people. It's meant that the people from the villages and everyone was able to do it. So whatever we've interpreted since then is a version of that. But everyone's connected, and I think that's part of the whole idea.
Yeah. So talk about costumes for a little bit. So do you change costumes for every single dance? Like when you're changing regions, like you've already mentioned several, your costumes look beautiful, by the way. I love looking at pictures on Facebook. They're really good. Do you change in between, or do you do like a set that's all Balkan and then go change, or how does that work?
Oh, that's a great question. So we do change for every different region, but we often will do a suite of dances and pieces. So the music will change slightly, and we'll do 3 different types of dance, but it'll be from that same region, and so it'll build in or incorporate different meters or how the different melodies, fast, slow, medium, tempo, and so you can kind of get a smattering of what that region might hold. And then after that suite is done, then in a show where we have live musicians, at least we'll have built-in orchestra sets, or you'll have the people who worked in that piece then be in the next one because they're able to have their costumes on already. So with our biggest suites where almost everyone is in it, then we have to have an orchestra set in between so we can all go change and get ready for the next one. So this 50th anniversary show that's coming up is going to be a marathon of doing that. And then it's carefully crafted so that whatever is the opening and closing number of each set before and after intermission, then there's time to change whatever it is that you need them to. But yes, every time, I mean, it's the socks. I mean, it's all the way down to what color tights we're wearing for the women, what socks, what shoe, footwear, or do we own those shoes, or are those ones that we have to get from the storage and whatnot. Whatever kind of dress it is, it often has some kind of apron and some kind of headgear and some kind of jewelry that's different for each one. So that's the short version.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot to get changed in the middle of a performance. Wow, that's so cool. Are all of these, I guess let's set the stage. Is it true that all of these, the dances are per song. So like a song comes on and you know immediately what the footwork is? Or how does that work? Like, how do you know? Because I know some folk
Yeah,
dances, like the name of the
they
dance
tell
is the
you.
name of the
Yeah.
song. Like the Macarena would be an example. Other people are familiar. Like if the Macarena comes on, you dance the
You know
Macarena.
what
You
to do.
don't typically dance the Macarena to other songs. Is the stuff that you do like that, or is it different?
Not quite in that we do choreographed pieces. So if we were to be at just a dance with a folk band or whatnot, like at somewhere at Tapestry, or we've gone to Milwaukee to a Serbian church there that puts on this big international festival, and at night then they bring in the band, and then people just do the line dancing, the Serbian line dance. But like each kolo or yeah, as they call dances there, might have a slightly different, melody or whatnot that will tell you something about what the folk work can be. But then there also is some variation in how people might interpret it. Some people are really hard and fast rules about that this music says that this is what it is. But if you do go to an actual dance, it might be that somebody's leading and mixing different things, and maybe they do or don't know, and so they'll maybe do a Bulgarian step to a Serbian, piece, and that's fine too. That's I wouldn't know at this point. I know
Yeah.
some, but some people are very well versed in that. So for us, because it's choreographed, we learn a lot about what it could have been, should have been. Whoever studied it and did the choreography wants it to be and wants to present the spirit of it to the audience. And so through that, then we can get an idea of, if I were to go to then a Balkan party, sometimes they've had a Bulgarian March, beginning of March is kind of, the springtime party. And so they've had ones here in St. Paul, Minneapolis, pre-COVID at least. And so, when something came on, it's like, oh, I remember that melody from whatever choreography we did. And it
Yeah.
makes sense because it has this bouncing tune and we do a little hop, we hear, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ways you can pick things out, but often for our group, at least, it's choreographed. So
Who does that choreography?
largely the director. And so Donald LaCourse is founding director along with sadly deceased Jonathan Fry. They co-founded it together, and Donald is still directing, and then co-director now Matthew LaCourse is also doing some of the choreographies, and other people throughout our history have contributed, or we've pulled from other choreographies found either through connections or had people come and workshop with us. So our upcoming show, our 50th show, Golden Memories is what it's called. It's a long time to have founding
Yes, it
director
is.
still be directing, by the way. So it's amazing.
That's awesome.
Don is quite amazing. So all the choreographies or all the pieces we're doing have something to do with a choreographer who is either a director or a former director or a former or current dancer in the company. So we have some really an interesting mix of what we'll be doing. There's a Franconian piece, which is the region in Germany, I'll say for purposes of this. And Anne von Bibra is a professor at St. Olaf of dance. And so she went there, studied, came back, made a choreography. It's been in our canon for a while. We're pulling that out to do. It's a really fun one. There's Eva Kish, who is part of the Minnesota Hungarian community, basically, and she did a Moldvai or Hungarian piece that we also just recently pulled out in the last year and kind of revamped. And so she's given some feedback. She's come and actually watched it and given us feedback on that, and etc. So we have people who are still connected, who are trying to do their choreographies for this 50th show.
That's awesome. So you've mentioned all these other communities. So like the Hungarian community, the Bulgarian community. Do these each all exist like separately, or do they all come together in your what is the community like when you refer to the community?
So I guess the community I think of, I guess, is ethnic dance theater. That's who I'm mostly connected to.
Yeah.
But the larger being in the Twin Cities, at least, let's say, if not the Midwest, yes, we have different like churches that might still hold some kind of cultural, festivals or whatnot. And so that might be the only time that their folk group gets together and does it, plans a choreography and does something. It might be that they perform at all sorts of things throughout the year. So there's kind of variances in that with the different communities, but there's definitely a very vibrant scene that used to be kind of just more displayed at Festival of Nations. And that's a big gaping hole in our Twin Cities cultural life, I think. It used to be a whole weekend in April or May, and students from all over the state would like bus in and go there for a day, and there were cultural booths and music and dance and food. And so we, Ethnic Dance Theater, performed there many years, I should say. And then COVID kind of took it off track. So that's one thing where when I say if the larger community, that would be a place for us all to come together. And so different things have popped up since then to try to kind of take that place. Because if you know one folk dancer in this group, and then you happen to know another dancer through whatever connection, actually some I see out, swing dancing or whatnot. Like dancers find each other, right? And so you're like, what things do you have coming up? And so you get to kind of know each other, and the groups sometimes have cross-pollination. If their parents are both, recent immigrants, maybe they're involved in both the Ukrainian and the Slovak community or whatnot. But I would say it is a little different than somewhere like Milwaukee or Chicago, where there are more recent, larger populations of recent immigrants. Here it's a little bit more subdued, but it's still very rich once you find the communities.
Yeah, that's me. I don't think people realize how they think the Midwest is very like monocultural. And my experience, at least living in the Twin Cities, is not that at all. And I guess part of it is I believe the Twin Cities, I think both of them are a sanctuary city, right, for refugees.
That sounds right.
There ends up being a lot of really diverse culture there. That's really interesting. So, okay, so we've talked about Balkan a decent bit. Can you walk me through like your last performance or some of the performances from last year? Like, what did the show look like? Where were those performances? Who do you perform for in the first place? Who comes to your dances, and what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, one, I can kind of continue on about this lack of Festival of Nations in that we have the Landmark Center series, which I don't know if you had ever gone there when you lived in St. Paul. And so downtown, there's a restored, beautiful building, and they have a huge ballroom that has 4 floors that you can look up and see around to the different floors, I guess you could say. So it's acoustically, it's pretty terrible actually for as I played with Szászka, my band there, and it's hard to hear, but it's a beautiful space and good for dancing at least. So we've held these different experiences co-hosted by the Landmark Center. So Landmark Center will do things on Sundays for like family friendly events with different cultures. And the last several years we've done a partnership with them, and we've had something like a Carpathian theme. And so it's not just our group, but then we're the ones who partner. Well, we partner with Landmark Center, but then we pull in those communities that we have connections to.
What is Carpathian? I don't know that word.
Or sorry, like the Carpathian region. So like they're the Carpathian Mountains. So we would draw from cultures that are somehow connected there. And then we had a Balkan experience for a couple of years. So we tried to do the same thing a couple of years in a row, because then you build in some of the same groups, and then COVID hit and whatnot. But now we had a mosaic this year, so we could bring anyone and everyone. It wouldn't have to be just by region. And so it was a tiny version of a Festival of Nations, is what a lot of people said. They were so glad to have that. And so we had food from different areas. We had groups from all over, or who originated from all over. And we also performed a couple of dances. We had a North Bulgarian piece that we did, and then also one from Ossetia, which is probably not too well known, but it's kind of the southern regions of Russia, right above Georgia, close to Georgian dance in some ways, or if you've heard Georgian song, I'm not sure
I don't know if I have. No. And if I did, I wouldn't even know. Have I? Like, I don't know.
But it's a very specific region that I should say. So this Ossetia is kind of between those two, and there's all sorts of political turmoil with having Russia there. And, but we actually had some of our dancers, directors, former dancers go there in either the 70s or 80s. I'm trying to remember, learn the dance from there, come back, have the dance in our canon now for years and years. And it's been modified somewhat, but one of those dancers came back to one of our rehearsals in the past few months and spoke about it and brought these old photo albums from the trip. And it was just incredible. And they were some of the only Westerners who had ever been there.
Wow.
So they're kind of celebrities as they were walking around. It's in the Caucasus Mountain area. And so a very specific, like strong people who are guarding the entrance of the, to the rest of Europe from this mountain pass and whatnot. So we got kind of like the folklore of what goes into the dance and how we should hold ourselves and be so proud. And the women like wore, daggers, and the men had their swords. It's like they're horse riding people. And anyway, so I mean, that's just a little, I guess, view into when you go somewhere and you can actually speak to the people, learn the dance from them, just the richness of what can be learned. And then that person came back and reminded us all of whatever the group was 40 years ago or 50 years ago, what they had learned. So that was one of the pieces that we did there. And people have reacted to that one almost every time with just awe. I had somebody come up to a couple of us who were in costume still as we were just kind of around the dance floor waiting for other dances to transpire, and just asking us so many questions about Ossetia and the region. And that's when I was like, I have to learn more about this because other people want to know. So it was great that we had somebody come and speak about it. But anyway, back to the landmark festival. So we did a North Bulgarian piece, an Ossetian piece, and then we had other groups there.
And what did you call these pieces? Kulpas? It's like these sections?
Well, in some Balkan dance, they'll call it a kolo.
That's just in Balkan dance. They're called that. Okay.
But yeah, and I would say, so anyway, it was a festival. So that was one way of presenting ourselves and other groups, and there were cultural booths around in the food. So that same little miniature Festival of Nations. And then last year we did a piece, or I should say we did a big show in March. And of course there's a blizzard that weekend. So it was one of those things where you go, well, we tried. Of course it snowed all last year, but oftentimes we'll have like a May or June show, but just the way things worked out, we hadn't had one in so long because of COVID. So we had many different elements, but we ended with a Ukrainian dance, and that was a lot of fun, but also, spoke to the times and trying to highlight the peoples who are going through so much there. So oftentimes when we've had dances that are political in nature, or I should say, it's always political in nature, what we do, because there's always something going on. So I know I've heard before my time, this is my 10th year in the company, but before I was there have been different dances that I've done. There was a Saudi Arabian piece that then during kind of post 9/11 was very controversial. There are other things that are also sometimes controversial that maybe display the gender roles in very striking or contrasting ways, and not always in a way that we are used to seeing or want to as progressive peoples. So there's always something political in nature, but I would say trying to present it in a way that honors the cultures of the peoples we're doing is the main thing, and to not brush it under the rug. There's such beauty to be shown. So last year that was one of the pieces that we did there. We had many others throughout the show, and then looking forward to this next show. I know I sent you the lineup, but I mean, we have so many dances going on.
Many. Anastasia mentions a lot of geography here. It's really interesting to look at modern-day borders compared to those regions where the different folk dance styles originate. If this all sounds interesting and you'd like to hear some examples, go to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio and sign up for my newsletter. I'll be listing out these dances Anastasia is talking about and the regions they come from. Where I can, I'll also provide links to examples you can go watch. It's amazing how different they are. That's ZEITGEIST academy.com/radio. Do you want to just read some of these, what they are? And I know that my geography of Europe could be a lot better, but some of these I'm like, I don't even know if this is like Ossetian. I had never heard of that area. I didn't realize that was a region. So
yeah, and some of it is that it's a country or used to be a country, or it's just a part of, or the peoples who live there live in another country or whatnot. So yeah, it gets a little wacky that way, but I think it's so good to think that way, because the way that reality is that we don't actually have borders that dictate everything being in boxes. And so, so anyway, this is a way to kind of think of it. So Croatian is the first dance that we'll start with in our show in June. And Posavina is the region. We have a lot of singing that goes on in that. So we're supposed to have a wall of sound. So as a singer, you can probably, relate to what that might be.
Yeah.
We are having our most pointed singing. I guess the way that our singing director, Natalie Nowitzki, who's the Ukrainian American singer who often works with us, is incredible. She said, this is the one where you're pointing to the back wall of the audience. And then the Tajikistan solo piece, just beautiful. One of our dancers who's from the Ukrainian group actually is doing that one. The Saidi Egyptian piece has like a coin belt. I guess you can really see the movements and hear them. The Moldvai Hungarian piece, that's one that I said was one of the choreographies from a Minnesota Hungarian here in town. And then the Ossetian or Georgian South Russian piece is a very upright, flowing piece. And we actually are on our demi point, like, I don't know, not up, all the way up on our toes, but we have to be on our, balls of our feet the entire time, almost, so that we can have this kind of floating feeling to it. And the dresses are very long, so you can't see the feet moving that way. So it's a really particular style. And then the North Bulgarian. So there's another political thing, is getting the specific countries right when you need to, because some people will tell you that's different than just Bulgaria. And the Franconian piece in Germany, and then Norteño, the northern part of Mexico, which actually is largely or heavily influenced by like a Germanic. It's influenced by like Germans as well, because you'll hear a lot of accordion and whatnot, but then the skirts are bright, and there is a lot of movement that is influenced by the indigenous culture. So it's a really interesting kind of mix with that piece.
That's interesting. So there, again, I'm picturing like these dances are all from like folk dance. The idea is like the dancing of the people, and it's like representing these cultures. That is an example I can think of that is like, again, kind of more complicated, because you've got like when you say indigenous folks there, like what specific, like there's Mexico's enormous. Which specific tribes are we talking about here? And then adding in, it's interesting that German and not like I would expect like Spanish more styles to be
right. I was surprised. Yes.
Wow, this is so cool. Like you're learning like so much political, like the effect of political movements on cultural elements. I'm fascinated by this. Yeah.
And in that case, we have a snapshot. So these dances or these costumes, it's when was it? When did somebody decide that was the case that we're showing this specific thing? But yes, I would say that it's fascinating. People, they do their whole doctorates on some of these. I'm
sure. Absolutely.
Places. So, and I'll just finish up with the Kalota Szegi Legényes. So Legényes is a Hungarian men's dance, and Kalota Szeg is actually, the Transylvanian region. So there's within that area, I'm still learning a bit, but being in a Transylvanian folk band, now I've been learning more. But that the idea, of course, Transylvania isn't a country, but it incorporates parts of both Romania and Hungary, and peoples from those regions, as well as the Roma people. And so there's just influences from all of those parts usually. But so the Kalota Szegi Legényes is a men's kind of showing off dance. So they do a lot of boot slapping. The music is great. I'm hoping to play along on it with the Primash in my band, who's the main fiddle player. And she's incredible, Colleen Birch. And then my other bandmates, Doug Code and Sarah Bruins, play the contra, which is sideways viola, and then bass with 3 gut strings. So it's like a very specific sound that we get. And I'm still learning that piece, so we'll see if I play on that or not. I have to do a quick costume change if so. But
would you play violin, or what would you? Violin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I joined the group month before COVID. And so a lot of my first pieces that I learned were by Zoom, which is fun. And then one last one is the American piece of Appalachian. And I know that also has its controversy. clogging in the US
Oh,
is
I was
influenced
wondering,
by,
like, what would this look like? Clogging. Yeah.
and yes, and there's a history there, with African American history within that, and white culture and being in the mountains. And I'm not well versed on it. I know that it can be controversial, and we're doing it, and it's a great piece. And I hope it at least brings light to what we have here as a nation when people do come together and produce their own
Yeah.
folk dances. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do clogging?
I mean, beyond this, no.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like clogging is its whole own thing, and I'm just picturing the steps. So, okay, so you've mentioned a couple where you're like on your toes, or I mean, I've seen clogging before, and it's maybe not quite. It's not quite as complex as like Irish tap dance, or not tap, but
And it probably depends on how complex you want to make it, right? Yes, but it's
yeah,
in the same realm, but not, yeah, but its own variation.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Wow.
And
Um,
we've done a lot of practice. I mean, rigorous practice with that. We have videos and
yeah,
to practice certain sequences, and yeah, so it's taken a while to get that style. I'd done the piece once several years ago, and it was so helpful that I'd already done it, because those who are just learning it, it just takes a while to get the style. So, but yes, that's true of many of the pieces you're saying, whether
I
it's on our
imagine. Yeah, the
balls or
footwork.
feet.
That's just one that I could recognize. Like, wow, that can be really. This is a lot of work. I think. I think if you're listening and you have an idea of the folk dance of like, oh, this is sweet, like old ladies walking in a circle, like this is pretty aerobic sometimes.
And that is something that is maybe a little bit different about doing things, choreographies, and with a company where we practice 8 hours a week. We're not paid. We are still a performing ensemble. We don't have to pay dues, but we do, you know, have to take parts of our life and give it up in order to do this for the love of it, basically. But then we
Yeah,
also get to learn these things and get to be dressed in these beautiful costumes that are owned by the company that aren't ours. And so we get to be a part of something greater. But yeah, we are giving up a lot, and it is quite rigorous. You have to be willing to put in the work, whether it's dancing or singing, which we do a lot of,
yeah.
or getting pulled into the orchestra, like I have for just a little bit. And it's like, ooh, the music in this. I want to learn more about this. So I can see that going, I kind of that direction for me now as well.
Yeah. So as a performer, again, you and I have played together. I know you're a violin player. So do they have any kind of alternate, like I know, for example, Egyptian music uses the Arabic scale, which has many more notes than our 12-tone scale. Do you encounter that with some of these other ones too, where you use tunings that for a Westerner would not be intrinsically like,
Oh,
do you know what I'm
that is
saying?
a great question. So I've only forayed into the Hungarian, Transylvanian aspects of this, but listening to the recordings that we have from our former shows and whatnot of live music on our stage when we do bring our orchestra together, I mean, there are certain things that definitely sound different to my ear, or we bring in certain instruments, or the orchestra does, or Don or owns some of the instruments. Like, it's like, okay, I have this Croatian instrument in my basement, so we're going to bring it out for this show because we have, or whatnot. So I mean, we have this kind of collection between the folk musicians and the orchestra, and then the director as well. But I myself am not well versed in the aspects of that beyond listening and thinking, okay, that's different than what I'm used to hearing, or what is that
Yeah.
instrument that's incorporated in there.
Yeah. Westerners can think it's out of tune. It's not. It's in perfect tune. It's just not Western tune.
In
Yeah.
some
So
of the slides. Yep.
do you have a live orchestra for every performance? By orchestra, what do you mean?
So I would say, going back to kind of the examples of different performances, for example, the Landmark Center, when we've had this sort of mini Festival of Nations idea, that's recorded music. We bring in other groups. It's a lot of just like a festival idea. When we've gone to outdoor festivals, we've performed like at the Czech and Slovak Festival in the fall. We often have done the past few years. We'll use recorded music. When we go to Milwaukee, Serbian church there, recorded. Chicago to Bulgarian. So festival, we've used recorded music. So that's most of what we do. And oh yeah, the Ukrainian Center holds something in November as well. So anyway, these festival ideas recorded, but then when we have our own show when it's only us, it's ethnic dance theater specifically, then the idea is to bring in the musicians and have live music. And so they practice for months beforehand. And then we get together, 2 months out and try to put things together. And they practice some more. We practice some more. We try to meld it together. And I just directed a pit orchestra for a high school musical for the first time a couple months ago now. And now I understand both sides of it, I think, a little better. And it is very difficult. So I just feel for the musicians because they want the music side of it. No, it's like, oh my goodness. But it's different than a musical, but similar in that there are live musicians, there are dancers. We have to come together. There's singing. We can't rush. We have to know the tempos. So, but that's something that, we had a lot of conflicts schedule wise this past time trying to schedule the show. And it was down to the fact of, are we going to have live music or are we not? And the director found it so important to have live music that we finally found a date. And so that's how important it is to him to have that.
Yeah, that's experience. Amazing. It's not as common, and like your standard violinist doesn't know these tunes or how they would be put together. Or wow, that's awesome. And I bet it does make a big difference just as an audience member to see that not only are people dancing, but there are people playing as well. Like that makes it a lot more immersive.
And the number of instruments that each of them play is incredible too.
Yes. Oh man. So if I've been invited to a performance and I've never been before, what are some things you would tell me to kind of get me oriented? Because otherwise it can just be like, oh, pretty costumes and weird beats. Like how can you help me if I've never been to get my feet under me and kind of walk in knowing a little bit about what's going on?
What you said already about, looking at the costumes, looking at what the footwork might be, that is kind of some of the basics. But I would say enjoy watching, like people watching. So enjoy the people who are also watching the performers. See if there's food available. See if there's like a way to enjoy it that you're comfortable with. So often, at these festivals and whatnot, there will be food. There will be people walking around, perhaps imbibing and whatnot, having a good time. There are families, there are little kids maybe running around trying to dance around to the music that's being played. Or so I would say find a way that's comfortable for you to enjoy it. And if it's a festival setting, and that would be a good way to get yourself into it, because a whole show, a 2-hour show, you may like it, you may find it very long, So I I've only heard great things from the audience members who have gone, but to kind of get your feet wet. And because I think that whole experience is what it is, the folk culture of whatever festival it might be, or that they're bringing in different folk cultures from different places, whatever the setting might be, to get a feel for it and make yourself comfortable as possible. But as far as the dancing part of it, listen for the music. What kind of music, gets you curious? See if you can ask the performers afterward what they're doing or beforehand. And that's often we'll try to stay in costume before or after, so that people who are interested can ask and don't feel shy about asking, okay, why are you wearing those shoes, or whatever it is. Like there's no wrong question. I came into this, as I said, without having a folk dance background. And so I'm always asking. So there are no bad questions. I would just say curiosity and enjoying the experience fully. And then if you do come to a whole show, if you enjoy that kind of thing, then to whatever the theme might be, it's more about being able to present, again, the beauty of whatever that culture might be in an interpretation for today. So we're trying to be authentic, and like, how can the audience perceive that in a way that they can digest in today's society? And it might be that it's a little old school, actually, because of the live music and, sitting at a performance and whatnot. But the fact that we change costumes every 3 minutes, or every other dance or whatnot, is maybe something to at least be impressed by and share with other people.
And to understand it's intentional. Like you've mentioned so many things that are like the types of shoes, like all these details, the colors of your tights mean something. They all mean something.
Mm-hmm. And the amount of thought that's put in by Don LaCourse, the director, is incredible. When I first started, I couldn't believe how many different necklaces and bracelets I had to keep track of in these little plastic bags for our first show, and we have to get them on in time. So like, get those shoes in order, and that's the first thing you change, so that in case something that happens, you don't get something else, and at least you have your shoes on. That's another thing I learned. So
That's amazing. What other tricks do you have for changing quickly?
oh goodness, I
How do
mean,
you do
yes.
your hair?
So that's a big deal every time. Okay, Don, do we need to have our, is it a braid? Is it full braid? Is it a pat? So we have fake hair braids actually. So we'll braid them in to make them look longer and fuller. So that sometimes when you're spinning or whatnot, they might swing out and they look more impressive. But other times we just loop them around, make a bun, and then oftentimes the headpiece will cover it. So it depends, if we're doing German dance, oftentimes we'll see the bun. If we're doing almost any other type of dance, we have some kind of head covering. Trying to think, I think I did a Polish dance where we could have our braid out. And I think the Croatian dance, one of them, we had like 2 braids. But besides that, it's always, what does the hair do for everything? And can we somehow put the headpiece over so so we can just hide it and put a lot of pins in. But yeah, so helping each other change. The last show, last March, we had a small number of women, the smallest I think we'd had in a while. And it was hard because we just didn't have enough of us to help each other change. Like that was something. So with, this year we have several more who've joined, which is great. But yeah, so helping each other and making sure you have everything laid out and you have some kind of system and we get a list from our costumers and it says everything in the order that you should put it on. So it's quite a marathon.
Yeah. Well, yeah, literally, physically too, probably.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite story from a performance, either as a performer or like attending? I don't know. I just love to hear some favorite awesome moments that you've had.
I had this moment, I think it was around 2016. So I'd only been in the company a couple of years, but we went to Milwaukee to this Serbian church there, or cathedral church. And they have a whole festival that they put on, as I was saying, in midwinter, actually. So every time we drive there in February, there's always a blizzard on the way there or back. But it's a fun time and great people. And we took a piece from the Glamoch region.
Where's that?
Which is Bosnia Herzegovina, to be brief. And so another kind of Balkan dance, but very different in some ways in that, first of all, there is no music, and it was all performed by the pulse and some calls that were called out by one of the male dancers. And we were performing it. Oh, and I should say the other part, which is another controversial dance, and in that the women aren't supposed to look at the men the whole time. And that's actually something in the Ossetian dance as well. So there are some dances where you're supposed to either look down or to the side or look at in a certain way. And in this dance, you're not supposed to look at the men if you're a female dancer. And so some folk dancers that don't really like that. And for today's, I guess what we want for today for every human, but it was part of the culture. So we do it, but it was on this stage that is almost hollow underneath it, that the wood was very resounding. And so when we had each pounding pulse that we were doing with our feet and the different beats that we had to do in the calls, and we did some singing in that one, you could just hear it echoing throughout, and there was absolute silence. And it's this huge hall. And I was saying, for festivals, like there are kids running around, there's food, there's drink, there's everything happening, and people hushed each other because they wanted to see this and hear it. And there were, it's Serbian church, so mostly from that community, but they just erupted when we were done. And we found out later that there were some people from that region actually there, and they just thought we did such a fantastic job. So that really spoke to me only a couple years in, like the integrity of the dance and the artistry that Don LaCourse and others throughout the years, he's brought in, stick to and hold to for making sure to present something that is correct, or something that at least people from the place can be proud of.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That just reminded me, the stage. Do you have a stage that you take with you to these different events, or some kind of dance floor? Because you need a floor.
That's a great question. So the outdoor, festivals, try to wear shoes they don't care about. And sometimes we perform on parking lots, like asphalt. So that's not good. Yeah. But for our shows that we're there for the weekend, there's a Marley floor that's rolled out. And we do practice the combination between a ballet studio in town and a church who has a wooden floor. But yes, sometimes you're on terrible floors and you have to either get rosin or hope that you don't tear your shoes up on the asphalt.
Oh my goodness. What do you wish that people knew, just like the general public, Joe Schmo on the street, knew about folk dancing?
Yeah, it's for everyone. And I think, saying that I'm in this group where we do a lot of choreographies and the more challenging and I guess impressive aspects of it, and that there's a set way that we're doing it to the music, that underneath all of that, again, we're trying to present the spirit of something, which is the beauty of it and the challenge that it can be. And the old ladies dancing in the circle until they're umpteen years old, and they can do that. And the little ones can do it. Everyone in the village can do it. I think that's the point of it. And that's what's so beautiful about the fact that it's still going on here in St. Paul, Minnesota, in different varying ways. And I think in every culture, although, again, our group largely does Balkan and European dances. And as I've said, there's some others, but we're largely influenced that way. I mean, every culture in the world has its version of this. And I think it's really important to get up and dance with your community. It's something we don't necessarily do a lot here in mainstream culture in the US.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. All right. Last question. So you were actually, so we did, I think we did almost all of our classes together. You were probably in I'm the class with Mark Mazzullo.
I might have listened to some of the episode with Ian Boswell earlier today because I was like, oh gosh, I should get a feel for this. And so many memories came back. Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize you weren't a music major until the end. I just thought you were. And you were. I mean,
I was at heart, let's be honest. But yeah, so it was our 18th century music history, and I think it was the lesson Mark Mazzullo did on Verdi, and he talked about the zeitgeist, and how, like, I remember in that class I realized, wait a second, like this whole thing just came alive, and I was like so like I was like shocked by the gossip, and I was loving the opera and all of the stuff that was going, and I'm like, I don't even like opera, what am I doing? And I realized that learning about all of these other pieces made it come alive, and Mark was such a good instructor in all of his classes. He was able to do that. So yeah, you were there for the word that has made a big impact on me. So I've come up with a thing called the zeitgeist moment, where like that moment to me is that moment where you learn something new about a culture and all of a sudden it just makes sense to you, or you're in a moment making music where you just click in and you feel part of something bigger than you, like that zeitgeist spirit of the times comes alive and overwhelms you. Anyway, you shared a beautiful story earlier. Would you call that a zeitgeist moment, or is there another memorable or recent zeitgeist moment for you?
I mean, that is one. And I love this word zeitgeist. And when I studied abroad, I studied in Austria. And so it's like, I learned a tiny bit of, ein bisschen Deutsch, a little bit of German. But anyway, yes, I think this is a great word to use for your whole idea here, and your school. So I have two things, I guess. So there was an international folk festival in Madison that I went to through the band that I'm in, Szászka, the Transylvanian folk band. And there was an awesome Balkan horn band, actually, that got up, and I think they're Americans, but I mean, they do Balkan music. But anyway, they just got the whole room up and dancing. And granted, most of the people are there because they want to be there and dance. However, that was the highest percentage of dancers were up right then. And then I was thinking also, just recently, I was at a bar in St. Paul, and there was a cover band playing, and everyone got up to dance to Sweet Caroline. And I have decided I'm not above that. I think that when you can't sit any longer and everyone jumps up, if you can't help but jump up and dance, then they have some magic there. And So whether it's, people in St. Paul at a bar or over in Madison at a Vulcan party, I mean, if the music calls for it and you can't help but move, then that is a zeitgeist moment for me. And those are just two recent ones,
Yes.
right? There's so many. So
yes, I love them. I'll share two as well then with you as they pertain to folk dancing. Again, I have not done a whole lot, but a few weeks ago we did go up to visit Wade's old dance teachers and the community that he started with in high school. And I have been to several of these, and it's always, like I mentioned, it's intimidating. And I'm someone who's danced a lot of different styles over the years, but they've mostly been partner dancing. So these line dances, they freak me out, man. Like, you got to follow the footwork. But I had a moment where there were a couple actually through that night that I kind of sort of remembered a little bit from the 3 or 4 times I'd done it before. And all of a sudden I just like relaxed and I was like, wait, I know this, like I can do this. And it was
your body knew.
Yes. Yes. And another one that I was many years ago, there's an Oktoberfest in Mount Angel, Oregon, that is a phenomenal Oktoberfest. And they had a Bavarian group performing, and they like hammed it up and went all like they were carrying, there was like these 6 or 8 guys, and they were carrying a door, and there were these women on the door, and like they would like push the door up and these women would flip. Like, it was very dramatic. They do this whole, like, they processed through the audience, and of course it was like really loud music, and it was just, but they were in these fancy costumes. It was kind of like river dance is to Irish dance, very dramatized. But I just remembered being like, oh my God, this is exciting. This is alive. This is vibrant. Even though it's, you picture Bavarian folk dancing, it's not like the first thing that comes to mind is like, wow. But I had a moment there. So yeah, I wanted to share those two with you.
Thank you. I'm really glad we had an excuse to share those.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you for inviting me, Morgan.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Zeitgeist Radio. If you'd like to take the next step in your musical journey, head over to zeitgeistacademy.com/radio to join my newsletter. Seriously, it's fun and informative, and I never spam or sell your information. That's zeitgeistacademy.com/radio. Music for this episode was created by Ian Boswell. Please hit that subscribe button and tell all your friends you found a cool new podcast. See you next time.